We are grateful for the collaboration and partnerships with the Department of the Treasury, with OFAC, DEA, IRS, and others in the fight to protect our citizens by prosecuting Mexico-based leadership of La Nueva Familia and cartel members operating in our district. As well, we will continue to attack the financial motivation of this cartel as they send their poison into our communities. Thank you.
Good morning. Special Agent in Charge Robert Murphy of DEA Atlanta. Welcome, Treasury Secretary Yellen. Appreciate you. Welcome to DEA Atlanta. So, new La Familia. That's what we're here to discuss, some actions being taken again. Not new to us here in DEA Atlanta. La Familia originated about 2007. From 2007 to 2010, La Familia was one of the largest drug trafficking organizations impacting the United States. DEA and its law enforcement partners attacked that organization, used every tool available, and were able to crush them. They rebranded themselves. At the time, La Familia was ran by Nazario Moreno Gonzalez and his brother Roberto Moreno Gonzalez, who ran operations in Atlanta. They rebranded themselves, tried to refer to themselves as Knights of the Templar. Nazario Moreno Gonzalez, founder and originator of La Familia, created kind of a cult, created his own Bible, and had everyone strictly adhere to it. They were known for not only the amount of drugs they were bringing into the U.S., but the propensity and the willingness to use violence. Very violent organization. Throughout our efforts, we were able to successfully destroy all their operations in the United States. They went back to Mexico, hadn't heard from them in a while. In 2021, DEA Atlanta developed intelligence that La Familia, the new La Familia, saw an opportunity. They wrongly miscalculated that DEA was hyper-focused on Sinaloa and CJ&G, which obviously we were. They are the biggest cartels impacting the United States. So they saw an opportunity to reestablish their trafficking here in the United States, with Atlanta being a major hub for them. We targeted those members here operating in Atlanta. That organization is responsible for over 12 tons of methamphetamine into the United States, equal amount of fentanyl and heroin, several tons of cocaine, and again, obviously, the amount of money that was being generated from that profit. Just here in Atlanta alone, we seized over 600 kilos of methamphetamine, several kilos of cocaine, 11,000 fentanyl pills just from the operations in here. We were able to get 13 indictments, 8 people arrested to date, and more to come. But more importantly, when DEA targets these organizations, we use every tool available to us. And one of the most powerful things we can do is deny them the fruits of their labor, the blood, the very essence of what these cartels need, their money. And with the tools that Secretary Yellen is going to talk about today, we were able to make sure that we were successful in all that. There's a twofold purpose, not only to deny them to sit back and enjoy the fruits of their labor of distributing poison in our communities. Obviously, we don't want that. But on the second front, we don't want them to use that money to make them stronger, have a bigger impact in the United States, and harder for law enforcement to deal. We were successful on both fronts, and I'm happy today to say that this is going to deal a fatal blow to this cartel's operations here, not only in Atlanta, but in the United States, and their willingness to be able to be effective at all as a cartel in the United States.
Good morning. My name is Demetrius Hardiman, Special Agent in Charge, Atlanta Field Office, IRS Criminal Investigation. As my cohorts have already stated, we have worked together for today's actions. We at IRS Criminal Investigation are here to take out the financial structures, and that is our part in dealing with drug traffickers in the United States. I'm thrilled to be here today to introduce Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen, and I'd like to begin by saying welcome to the great city of Atlanta. Our purpose here today is twofold. First, we're here to exchange information and continue to deepen our collaboration. And secondly, we want to continue to expand on our existing partnerships between the Treasury Department, federal, state, and local law enforcement, the United States Attorney's Office, as well as our partners in the banking industry. The fight against fentanyl trafficking requires an all-hands approach, with each partner leveraging their unique authorities and resources in the joint effort to protect our communities. Late last year, Secretary Yellen launched the Counter Fentanyl Strike Force, chaired by IRS Criminal Investigation and the Treasury Office of Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, bringing together resources across the department to combat the flow of illicit fentanyl into our communities. Following the money is essential to combating crimes like fentanyl trafficking, and it is what IRS Criminal Investigation special agents do best. With Secretary Yellen's deep commitment to providing resources and platforms in collaboration like this one, our work will continue to, no doubt, stem the flow of these drugs into our streets. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome Secretary Yellen to the podium. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning. I'm here in Atlanta today with the Drug Enforcement Administration and the U.S. Attorney's Office to announce two important actions we're taking to combat the opioid crisis. First, Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control has sanctioned 8 targets affiliated with La Nueva Familia Michoacana, a notorious Mexican criminal organization that traffics fentanyl and other legal drugs into the United States, including in Georgia. Second, Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network has issued a new advisory for financial institutions to help them detect financial flows that fuel the illicit fentanyl supply chain. This is critical to enabling law enforcement and sanctions actions against fentanyl traffickers. Let me further explain why these actions matter and put them in the context of President Biden's and Treasury's broader counter-narcotics strategy. Since 2000, more than 1 million people in the United States have died of drug overdoses. Hundreds of thousands more Americans could die from drug overdoses by the end of this decade. And fentanyl and other synthetic opioids make up the significant majority of drug-related deaths. Here in Georgia, overdose deaths involving fentanyl increased by over 200% between 2019 and 2021. And this is simply a staggering, almost unimaginable toll. Far too many families and communities across the United States are losing their loved ones to opioids. And while this is first and foremost a heartbreaking personal loss, it's also a loss for our country. The U.S. Joint Economic Committee estimates that the opioid epidemic cost America nearly $1.5 trillion in 2020. And that's why President Biden has directed the entire U.S. government to use every tool at our disposal to combat the opioid epidemic and save lives. It's a priority of the President's unity agenda. The administration has expanded treatment for Americans across the United States, including by increasing access to life-saving medication. The President has also bolstered law enforcement capabilities at and within our borders, such as by adding more drug detection machines at points of entry. U.S. law enforcement has seized more fentanyl at ports of entry in the past 2 years than in the previous 5 years combined. And as we look ahead, the President's budget would allow us to strengthen these efforts, including by putting in place 100 additional cutting-edge inspection machines to help detect fentanyl. We're also engaging with our foreign partners. Last July, President Biden launched the Global Coalition to Address Synthetic Drug Threats that brings together more than 100 countries and 11 international organizations. And counter-narcotics is a focus in our bilateral relationships, including with China, the key source of the precursor chemicals used to manufacture fentanyl. President Biden and President Xi agreed to resume cooperation on counter-narcotics last year, and Treasury plays an active and important role in the newly established Counter-Narcotics Working Group. And I've also raised this issue directly with my Chinese counterparts. And one of the outcomes of my trip to China in April was agreeing to deeper cooperation in fighting money laundering, which will help us crack down on narcotics trafficking. Collaboration with Mexico is also crucial. As I saw firsthand when I traveled to Mexico in December and announced sanctions against the Beltran-Leyva organization, our joint efforts span specific actions to broader work to develop financial flow typologies. Treasury is committed to sharing more information, including with financial institutions on both sides of the border. And we will emphasize the need for even greater cooperation as we engage with President Sheinbaum. Our work with partners and at home is rooted in the understanding that cartels that peddle fentanyl operate in many respects like other businesses. They rely on access to banking systems and to the US dollar to make payroll and finance purchases. And this means the Treasury Department has a unique ability to disrupt and degrade their operations. We're particularly focused on two areas related to today's actions: sanctions and partnerships with financial institutions. Treasury's sanctions target kingpins and their support networks who seek to exploit our financial system to traffic narcotics. An executive order strengthened our ability to go after drug trafficking organizations, their enablers, and their financial facilitators. And over the past 2 years, Treasury has sanctioned more than 250 targets for involvement in drug trafficking activities. In recent months, this has included targeting Mexican individuals and entities linked to the most notorious Mexican cartels, from CJNG to the Sinaloa cartel. Today's action advances our efforts by targeting high-level leaders of a cartel that traffics drugs across our southern border to Dallas and Houston, and then farther afield to Chicago, Charlotte, and to right here in Atlanta. La Nueva Familia Michoacana is also involved in smuggling migrants from Mexico to the United States. The leaders we're targeting have carried out heinous acts, from controlling drug routes to arms trafficking to money laundering to murder. 2 of those designated have been indicted by courts here in Georgia, including on charges of heroin conspiracy and money laundering. Our sanctions will cut off the cartel leaders from their ill-gotten money and make it harder for them to bring deadly fentanyl to our streets. Our ability to carry out these sanction actions and other actions is supported by our engagement with the private sector. We know that narco-trafficking organizations, including major cartels, rely on anonymous corporate structures, shell companies, to launder and stash their profits. So we're taking systematic action to stop this. As part of our implementation of the bipartisan Corporate Transparency Act, we now require many companies to report basic information about who owns or controls them. That's information we can then use to combat illicit finance. We're also partnering with financial institutions to to support their crucial role in flagging potentially illegal activity. Last month, Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, in partnership with IRS Criminal Investigation, began a new series of public-private information sharing exchanges that bring together law enforcement and regional and local banks to share information on tracking illicit financial flows. That includes indicators of fentanyl-related activity. We plan to reach 10 cities across the United States by the end of this year. And I look forward to meeting this afternoon with law enforcement and financial institutions to deepen similar cooperation. The advisory I'm announcing today is another important step. It provides information and guidance to help financial institutions identify and report suspicious transactions related to the procurement of precursor chemicals and manufacturing equipment used to manufacture illicit fentanyl and other synthetic opioids. This allows us to follow the money behind the illicit fentanyl supply chain and go after the criminals perpetrating and profiting off of the opioid epidemic. So combating the trafficking of fentanyl is a significant challenge, and it's something that will not be solved overnight. But let me be clear, the President and I will do everything we can to combat this crisis. Treasury's recently established counter-fentanyl strike force will help us coordinate our efforts and make sure we're leveraging all of our authorities. We'll continue to work with partners at home and abroad, and we will deploy all the tools at our disposal to keep Americans safe, to strengthen our economy, and to protect our financial system. So thank you so much to DEA for your hard work, deep expertise, and collaboration. And thank you to all of you for being here to mark today's milestone.
All right, I'm going to open it up for questions. I call on you. Grady in the back has a microphone, so he'll bring that to you. Our first question will go to Chris Condon with Bloomberg.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Secretary Yellen. With due respect to this very important topic, I would like to ask a two-part question about a separate topic that is getting a lot of attention in Washington these days, and that is tariffs. First of all, I'm wondering if you agree with the assessment from your predecessor, Larry Summers, that the proposals from former President Trump for imposing across-the-board 10% tariffs would be stagflationary. And then second, on Biden administration tariff policies. You said 2 years ago, when the administration was assessing the tariffs put in place in 2018 and 2019, that some of those, and I'll quote you, impose more harm on U.S. consumers and businesses and aren't very strategic in the sense of addressing real issues we have with China. So I'm wondering, when President Biden added to the China tariffs last month, why did the administration not remove some of the prior tariffs that you clearly were not comfortable with? Thank you.
So the tariffs that we put in place against China, I do believe, are highly strategic. They're targeted at areas that China is investing very heavily in, to the point where they've caused huge overcapacity. And I mean that in areas like electric batteries, solar panels, and other things related to clean energy, and to some extent to semiconductors. Total production capacity in China exceeds global demand, and we really refuse to let our companies in this strategic, important, burgeoning sector that are critical to creating good jobs in America and to addressing the climate crisis. We refuse to allow them to be put out of business by dumping by a coordinated Chinese effort. And we're not the only country who feel that way. I would point out that in the G7 summit recent leaders' statement, all of the G7 leaders acknowledged issues with overcapacity that threaten our domestic industries. So with respect to the existing tariffs that were not removed, I guess I would say that we see those as, we see that China has not responded by removing, these were tariffs that were put in place because of unfair trade practices that China was found guilty of in a 301 action. And given that China has not done anything really to address those concerns, we thought it was inappropriate to remove those tariffs. In connection with the Trump tariffs, these are really across the board tariffs, as I understand it, that would affect all of our trade partners and all of our trade. And I believe that is a substantial enough program that it would both raise costs to consumers broadly on all the imports they buy and harm American businesses, many of whom rely on imported goods for their supply chains. It would significantly raise their costs.
All right, next we're going to go to Rich from Reuters.
Madam Secretary, I have a question related to Russian President Putin's visit to Vietnam. How concerned are you about all the agreements they signed on oil, gas, and nuclear? Does this cause you to rethink the U.S. strategy to draw Vietnam closer as a friend-shoring destination for supply chains? Does it impact Vietnam's push to be recognized as a market economy?
So Vietnam is a country with whom we have deepened our economic relationship. President Biden visited Vietnam last year, and we've upgraded our relationship. You're right that we do see Vietnam as in a country that could be part of our friend-shoring in our effort to diversify supply. Now, Vietnam has a policy and strategy of working collaboratively with many different countries, and it is not a condition of our partnership that they sever their ties to Russia or to China. And we are concerned about emissions and lowering emissions and addressing greenhouse gases in Vietnam. We are part of it's called the JETP, Just Energy Transition Partnership with Vietnam, in which we're working collaboratively to lower emissions. So I don't know the details of all of what you described as an agreement with President Putin, but Vietnam has announced as an objective lowering their emissions over time, and we're working to help provide financing for that.
Next, let's go to Sarah with GPB.
Secretary Yellen, thank you for being here. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of holding these announcements here in Atlanta?
I'm sorry, you've what?
Could you talk a little bit about the importance of holding these two announcements here in Atlanta?
Yes. I mean, Atlanta, like other parts of the country, but in some cases even more so, fentanyl and the opioid crisis, this is very real, and it affects many families, an increasing number here in Georgia. And it is a port through which synthetic opioids are transported and is part of the drug trafficking. And we've worked very closely here, as you heard, with DEA and the Department of Justice. This has been a joint activity, and also working jointly with Mexico to put in place these enforcement actions.
And our last question will go to Karis. Am I saying that right?
Hi, Karis Belger, 11 Alive News. Thank you. Secretary Yellen, first, thank you for being here. I have a question more about the economy domestically. Overall, inflation has gone down, but the average American is still struggling with everyday goods. I know here I've reported frequently on how the average person is supplementing their household food groceries with visits to the food bank. What do you say to those people who are not seeing the benefits of Biden's economic policy and every day are still trying to make ends meet?
Well, I think the problems with Americans feeling that there are necessities of life that are just becoming unaffordable really date back some way. But the price increases that occurred during the pandemic made matters worse. And President Biden understands the struggles that American households face. Affordable housing is extremely hard to find, limited in supply. President Biden has taken a number of steps to address that. We consider it a critical priority to increase the supply of affordable housing. Health care, President Biden's worked hard to make sure for seniors to limit co-pays on insulin to $35 and to limit overall co-pays that seniors face who are part of Medicare, and working to lower on a permanent basis, keep low the premiums for the Affordable Care Act. Child care is becoming unaffordable for so many Americans. President Biden has proposed ways to address that as well. President Biden wants to cut taxes for hardworking families. During the pandemic, we had in place a child tax credit so that a family with 2 children under the age of 16 were receiving typically $600 on a monthly basis to help with expenses. And we saw the biggest reduction in the poverty rate by almost 50% as a consequence. So President Biden has made affordability his top priority. He's obviously taken steps in education, forgiving student loans and other things, and trying to make sure that working families can afford a decent standard of living really is a top priority.
All right, thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming.